To know how important today's story is, you have to understand that China-U.S. relations got off to a rough start. The 1950s was a dark time for ties. At home, the PRC was undergoing economic difficulties. Abroad, it was politically isolated by Western countries, spearheaded by the U.S. Cold War strategy.
Since the presidency of Harry Truman, Washington had adopted a policy of containment towards China. And this resulted in political isolation, military containment, and an economic embargo on Beijing. Dwight Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy inherited these iron fist policies. But hope came in the mid-1960s. The Lyndon-Johnson administration once considered changing its China policy to containment without isolation. One word, big difference. And Chinese diplomats sniffed out optimism, but they needed an opportunity for the decades-long rivals to start talking, and the chance eventually came.
The day was April the 4th, 1971. The setting, the 31st World Table Tennis Championships in Nagoya, Japan. The Chinese table tennis players were about to set off to the stadium in their team bus when something unexpected happened. A long-haired foreigner jumped on board just before the door closed. It was Glenn Cohen from the U.S. team.
But the atmosphere immediately grew tense. For a few minutes, nobody talked. But you have to remember that these were young athletes in their early 20s. None of them were prepared for what must have been an intense encounter. Finally, one of the Chinese players broke the silence.
台上谁都不敢跟他说话，我呢又坐在车的最后，离他最远，最后边。我一看别人都不理他，那我在想什么呢？我想他是个运动员。 是不是？我们这次出来，周总理教的我们是友谊第一比赛点。
Before Cohen got off, Zhuang gave him an embroidered towel with scenery of China's Huangshan Mountain. On the second day, Cohen gave Zhuang a sports shirt as a present in return. Speculation around China-U.S. relations quickly mounted. The following day, the American team leader Rutherford Harrison made a request for the U.S. team to go to China so the Chinese players can teach them. It was the second time Harrison had made the request since the Chinese team arrived in Japan.
On April the 7th, the last day of the Games, good news arrived. A direct order from China's top leader Mao Zedong arrived in Nagoya just in time to stop the U.S. team from heading home in disappointment. After 3 days of contemplation, Mao accepted Harrison's request, sent an invitation to the American players to visit China, and the wheel started to turn again.
The American table tennis team visited China from April the 10th to the 17th. From the first handshake between Zhuang and Cohen to this picture, it took less than a month for the two very different worlds to start talking again.
The vision of the Chinese and American diplomats responsible for détente is referred to today as the Ping Pong Diplomacy. People started to realize that Americans and Chinese are not so different. The two sides are ready to take one step further, but in the midst of Cold War, China and the U.S. represented more than themselves. So the step had to be walked with extreme caution. Tomorrow, in our next episode, I'll tell you the follow-up story of how diplomats worked their magic to pave the way for the establishment of China-U.S. diplomatic ties. I'm Li Dongning. Stay tuned.